a few weeks ago. Trying to figure out where to stand so I don't block it. Is this good? I got to thinking about what we could talk about, and I asked both Laura and Jose Sanchez to come with me, and I'll do a little bit more of an introduction in a minute. But I wanted to say that we're here, it said in the thing, that we're here to deepen our understanding of God's call to peace. This isn't just something we do, right? Because, well, we just do it. No, this is God's call to peace. That's something profound. I got to thinking about what does that mean. And I, throughout the month, this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And every October, I wake up and before my feet hit the floor, I say the 121st Psalm. It reminds me of what this is all about. I lift my eyes to the hills, from where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made the heavens and the earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on forevermore. Well, that's powerful. It's wonderful to know that God is with me, but just once in a while, you're God's hands and feet. You're God's voice. You, the people of God, have to stand with me, right? It's not all about God Almighty. We have to be the peacemakers. And so, at Bridge of Peace, we stand together. This is our new book library. And it says there, Stop the Violence. I just noticed that when I walked into our sanctuary, and our deacon Samantha had done it. I looked at it. I was preparing for a funeral, which I have today at 1 o'clock. Yeah, it's a busy day in my life. Do you see it? Right on his head? Stop the violence. That even as we put it outside, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we're saying to the community, here we are at Bridge of Peace. We're going to stop the violence in our neighborhood. That's who we are at Bridge of Peace. That's what we need to be about. We need to have a table in our sanctuary. It's right there. Every Sunday, people can walk in, suicide prevention, domestic violence awareness pamphlets in Spanish and English. There are people like my good friends, Laura and Jose, who are advocates. I'm an MSW, Laura's an MSW. Jose works for Catholic Charities. We have a lot of resources right in our pews. And so when we say we would like to stop the violence, we have some resources that we can use. And so each and every one of us can do something. And it's not just about knowing that God is with us, but we are the hands and feet and voice. So Laura, we just gave her a title. It's not just a title, though. She actually does this. She is our new Justice and Advocacy Initiatives Coordinator. Try saying that a few times, though. She does this. She coordinates all our advocacy within the ministry. Isn't that cool? To have someone who can do that? And She does not do that alone. She does that with all of us. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura, but she does have a partner in life at the church, Mr. Jose, and so both of them are going to do the rest of our presentation.
How do we just pause it so we can't?
What do you want to do?
We don't want the picture up right now, but when we're ready for it, we do. Flexibility. That's the other word at Bridge of Peace. Be flexible.
So Jose and I have been doing this for a while. I don't know if anybody's here. Several years ago, we used to go to churches. We did several suburban ones, and talked about domestic violence and what the church can do to work toward ending domestic violence within your congregation and in the world, and support people who are experiencing domestic violence. First of all, we want to say that everyone, I'm sure, understands that this is a safe place. So as we talk about things, if you want to say something that is personal from your background, feel free to do so, because you can trust the people who are here. And the other is, whenever we talk about domestic violence, there might be triggers. So if you feel triggered, you probably know somebody else that's here with you that you could ask to go and talk with you, listen to you, pray with you, whatever you need. And if not, there's plenty of pastors who by default could do that, which some of them you can tell by talks.
So we're going to do a little exercise here, and just bear with us. I'm going to ask a couple questions, but before I ask that, I want you guys to just center yourselves and a little bit, take a couple of deep breaths, and then close your eyes for me, and I'll ask the questions. So please take a couple of breaths, in and out. Close your eyes, and raise your hand if any of these things have happened to you or you've been part of. Did you grow up in a household in which there was family violence? Have you been hit, choked, physical violence, demeaned, ridiculed, threatened, forced to have sex, isolated in an intimate partner relationship? Do you know anyone in your family or the community who is being abused? Thank you.
Okay, usually when we do this, the numbers are a little different than this, but it still makes the point. Did you grow up in a household in which there was family violence? We had 2 people who felt safe enough to raise their hands. Have you ever been hit, choked, experienced other physical violence, demeaned, ridiculed, threatened, forced to have sex or do sex acts you were not comfortable with, and or isolated in an intimate partner relationship? And one person raised their hand for that. Do you know anyone in your family or the community who is currently being abused? And we might also have someone who was abused. But 6 people who were here said that. The point when we do this is to help illustrate that domestic violence is not confined to any one demographic. It's not suburban, it's not rural, it's not urban, it's not black folks, it's not white folks. It's not Latinos or anything else, and it is not only straight folks. It can also be anybody from the LGBTQIA+ community. I will say, though, that when we do this talk, we tend to use that pronoun she as the person experiencing the domestic violence. That's because most domestic violence is committed against and on women. But we do it with the understanding that all of those other populations can also be victims and then survivors. we've had a lot of experience with this at Bridge of Peace, and one of the people that I was blessed to be able to offer something to was a woman named Jill from the neighborhood who used to come into our food pantry when we first opened it. At that point, it was in the house where Jose and I were living at the time. And she would come in and talk and sit because people came in through the living room to come to the pantry and for help. And I knew that she was experiencing domestic violence in her relationship because she talked about it. She talked about the hurt, she talked about the physical pain and the mental and emotional pain. And I gave her food. And she would come back and we would do the same. And I offered to assist her in finding resources if she wanted them. She did not up until the point where we no longer saw her. The last time I saw her, she came in with her husband, and she had a bruise and was splinted from here to here. That time she didn't talk to me. She basically looked down. She didn't say much of anything at all, and he glared at me. After that, Jill never came back, and we didn't see her, so I don't know what happened with her. So one of the points to that is that when I first met Jill, I had an inkling that she was being abused. So let me ask you, if you are interacting with people in your congregation or any other setting, work, a club, the store down the street, what are some things that might give you a hint that this person is being abused? Anybody? And Pastor Andy, if nobody else talks, you can start. Pardon?
Burn marks.
Ooh, yeah, burn marks.
Bruises, black eyes in particular.
Bruises and black eyes, yes. And makeup doesn't always cover them. Yeah.
Sometimes being very withdrawn.
Very withdrawn. And in particular, if somebody starts a new relationship and they were never like that, but after a while they start to be, that might be a clue that something is going on in the relationship. Any other things that anybody can think of?
Constantly looking at their phones.
Constantly looking at their phones. We experienced that with somebody in Bible study back in the early days of Bridge of Peace. And it turned out worried that if they don't respond, read the text and answer right away, or don't go and take the call, that they will be paying for it when they go home. Any others that people can think of? Yeah.
Denial and mistrust or non-trust in other people.
Yeah. It can be very hard to trust other people, so you might be very friendly and open and offering to someone of friendship, and they might just be withdrawn and not wanting to accept that, not able to accept it. In some cases, they would have been that way, as I said before, but then when they get into this relationship, they might not be any longer. So yeah, that's a clue. Are there any others before I look at my list and see what we don't have?
Usually broken limbs.
Broken limbs, and that was one of the things that happened with Jill. With her, I already did know the history, but there are times when we have seen people that, yeah, that was a clue. And sometimes, one of the classic ones is somebody will come in and you'll say, what happened? And they'll say, oh, I fell and bumped my eye on the doorknob. But very often we know what's going on, or we have an inkling and are pretty sure that the person didn't bump their eye on the doorknob. Okay. Yeah, this really goes along with what one person said, how they interact or don't with other people. Does she come alone to things? Is she allowed to come alone to things? And if she comes to things alone, does she have to constantly be looking at texts and answering them immediately? Does she look nervous every time they come in? Does she run out as soon as it's over? And this is another one from experience at Bridge of Peace. As soon as Bible study or whatever is over, does she have to run out to the person waiting? Does she look at him before talking? because she's afraid. Can she talk? And will she or won't she say the right thing? And does he talk for her? Sometimes we'll hear things that are said in a group setting. We had a couple, at the beginning of Bridge of Peace, we did a lot of community building story circles. And we had one couple in which the man was the one that was abused, and his wife, we don't think he was ever physically abused, but he was definitely emotionally and mentally abused, and she would very often ridicule him in a group setting. She would say he couldn't do this or that. One of the ones I really remember for some reason is, I almost said his name, he had a tool belt, but she didn't know why, because he wasn't a regular man, he didn't know how to use anything on it. And similar things, which of course was very humiliating and abusive for him. So, what is domestic violence and what is it about? That's kind of a broad question. Yeah. We'll start with one of the classic. Oh, Andy, could you pass these out? Sorry. I'm going to need to start calling you Pastor. From vicar to Andy to pastor.
He has the triple personality.
I'll go this way.
That's why you keep looking at
Jose and Pastor Giselle just told me we have to go a little faster. What's the time? 10:25? Oh, what's the...
How long did you go?
Our next lecture is at 11, so you
So-
have,
Yeah, so we could go another 20
you have
minutes.
30
10,
30 minutes.
You're generous. Okay, we'll get started with this. One of the primary visuals that's used around the country, everywhere people talk about domestic violence, is the power and control wheel. And there's actually several of these. There is one that is the LGBTQIA plus power and control wheel. There's one that's an equality wheel. However, this is the basic one that's always used, because domestic violence is not about anger. It's about power and control. It's about exhibiting power and control over another person. So, on the outside of the power and control wheel, very often domestic violence includes physical and or sexual violence. One of the questions we asked included both physical and sexual acts that are abusive. And then within that, working and helping to maintain that power and control are all of these things that might happen between the people. And I'm not going to read all of them. I'm sure that all of you can read them or have someone read them with you. But basically, using coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming. If they have children, using the children, using male privilege, and using economic abuse. We actually know someone very, very dear to us who, I had not looked at this in a while, and I just realized when I looked at it while we were sitting here, that she experienced 5 out of these 10 things. She was never, to our knowledge, hit or any other physical violence. However, she experienced intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, and minimizing, blaming, and denying by the person doing it. So you can have someone being abused without anything physical going on. Are there any questions or concerns or, I don't know, thoughts about that? The reason I have, well, you use this all the time, but it's important to point out because a lot of people think that domestic violence is about anger, but it's not about anger. It's about power and control. And Jose is going to get into, yeah.
So why does domestic violence continue to thrive in communities including a church community as well as our community and where we live. And one example is things that has happened to me, and I witnessed something not too long ago, is culture. Particularly in my culture, the Latino culture in Puerto Rican, and we're taught that things that happen in our house and in our relationships is between myself and the woman, or it remains in the house, it's a family matter, it is no one's business. So one of the things that happens is that culture still exists. About a month and a half ago or so, a domestic incident was happening, a domestic violence incident was happening. And as I talked to the guy and the police came, a group of Latino males came in motorcycles and started roaming around the police and everything, and they were trying to figure out what was going on, and I told them, and they said, that's none of your business, why are you going to have them arrested? So it happens, and it happens on an ongoing basis, and we as men, we have to make sure that it doesn't happen and it continues to happen. Now, moving into our culture, the American culture, some reasons that it continues to happen between men allow this to happen when they know that something is going on. There is a story from a long time ago where there were two guys. It was an African American male, deacon, very good looking, handsome, very big, and he was there. He was an attention getter. And then there was a construction guy. He knew how to use his hands, he knew how to build and everything like that. And a number of guys fawned over him like nothing. We had an inkling that they were doing something that was wrong because of the conversations they had. But because they were construction workers and deacons and things, and in a position of power and everything, men looked aside to that other part because they needed to be around that presence. And when we called it out and when we started talking about it, what we thought was going on and everything, they went away on their own. Because one of the things that happens when you start catching somebody in what they're doing and everything, one of the things that you do is you go somewhere else and be able to continue to do it. So that happened with us, and sometimes it's difficult because you get called and saying that, why did you make that person go away? He was a resource to our church. He was a deacon. He could talk to people. He would bring people in and everything. But we have to make a choice. And sometimes choices that we make will lose some of the people that we have in our settings.
Not only did the people end up going away, but it created some dissension between those of us who identified the domestic violence that was going on and knew the women, empathized with the women, wanted to see it stop, and those who basically really admired, respected, and loved the men that were doing that. But our point with that is that people get away with it because very often nobody else is going to know what's happening or believe it's happening. Oh my goodness, he's a deacon in my church. He would never do that. And that's because that's how he presents himself to everybody else. He's our family doctor. I can't believe it. He's so gentle. Well, he's gentle when he's in his office and he's the family doctor and he's out in the community coaching baseball. But when you get behind the doors of his home, he's beating the living daylights, thank you, out of his spouse or partner. So if we think someone is being abused in our church or anywhere, both as clergy and as laypersons, what are some things that we might be able to do? And again, I'm asking you all this. Yeah.
Listen and support.
Listen. I'm sorry, the last thing you said.
Listen and support best we can, because everybody
listening will help. Yeah, the person who's listening is definitely a helper. Anything else that we can do or offer?
Try to save their lives.
Try to save their lives, yeah. And sometimes we're going to tell a little bit of a story at the end about that, about an opportunity to do that. Anything else?
Believe the person who's telling the story. Just believe them.
Yeah, believe them, and don't get into the, oh my gosh, you couldn't do that, I don't believe it. Pastor is very, very accurate with that. Let's see, be available, invite her to things, but don't push. Don't say, oh, you have to come, because maybe she can't come. Maybe she's not allowed to come. But she knows she's welcome. She knows people want her. There was another person early on in our ministry who came to Bible study. And we had never seen her before, but she had heard the church was there and having Bible study, and she wanted to come. So she came in, she sat, we were around the table in the rear of the sanctuary at that point for Bible study. And two of us, Renee, and I recognized that something was going on because she did, in fact, look at her phone constantly. If there was a text, she answered it right away, and she always looked nervous. She would we had the doors open, it was summer, and she would actually look out the door often. So Renee and I were both doing domestic violence response team work, and were very alert to what was going on. So afterwards, what do you think we did?
Did you try to speak to her?
We did. What did we say?
Are you okay?
That's exactly what we said. We said, and we had met her, and there was no secret as to her name. We said, Naomi, are you okay? You know, we're really glad to see you here. We really care about you, and we just want to know, are you okay? And she put on a great smile and said, yes, she was okay. And we said, well, we really invite you to come back, and we hope you will. Come back to Bible study, come to service if you want to. And she said thank you and ran out and got in the truck with the man who was abusing her. She eventually did become a member of Bridge of Peace, a member of the choir, a member of, she was a deacon in the beginning too. I already did that. So she was able to leave him, and he was actually a coward. The only person he ever laid his hands on was her, other than the people he was with in the ring, because he was a local boxer, and very often hit her about her head with a closed fist. But anyway, she was able to leave, and we did what we could as a congregation. Once she was ready, we talked to her about resources. We had people who prayed with her, but we never said, oh my God, are you being abused? Either at that first Bible study or any other time.
Telling me what to do.
So what should we do now versus what shouldn't we do? Anybody has any comments on what shouldn't we as individuals or as clergy in a community when this situation is in front of you?
Don't ignore it.
Don't ignore it. But Grandy, you haven't said anything.
Don't try to force somebody to do something that they're not ready to do yet.
Yes, sir. Anything else? Yeah, so,
Pastor Sarah?
So one of the things that, in my experience working with particularly women who are experiencing domestic violence, is that the first time they leave, it takes 3 times. Like, don't give up on them. You know, people leave and you feel like, oh, great, we've got this solved. It's really, really hard. And it's really easy to get discouraged and sort of start blaming them because they're choosing to go back and all of that. It's such a difficult cycle to break that I guess I just want to say, like, it's don't give up on people. Like, it's gonna be a process and a journey, and people are going to go back and get abused again, and you just still have to be there for them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that. And we actually have one pretty much going on right now at Bridge of Peace. And
I had a fit when the person went back to the abuser, but then I had to remember, you know.
So that person is the one that has to make the decision. Anyone else?
And to that end, it also removes their control, right? It's about power and control. If we tell them, oh, you got to get out of the relationship, it's the best thing for you. Who's got the control? I do. I can't remove that power and control from that person. And Bernadette, who works with domestic violence, said that, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, and I went, oh my goodness, that makes all the sense in the world. So I want to say that, right? We all want to say, just get out of the relationship. It's the best thing for you.
And we have laypersons who say that, some of whom have been abused.
Yeah, but it's got to be their choice, right? Because in making that choice and eventually them really getting out of the relationship, just imagine the strength that they have, the power they feel when they really get out of it. And then we can really celebrate that. So that's a learning for me.
Yeah, and one of my first mentors and teachers, just an additional way of saying that, and we talked about this the other night, Sharon Miller used to always say, whenever she talked about this, she is the expert in her life and in her relationship. You are not. She's the expert. And she knows what she can do, she knows what she can't do safely, and what she needs to do. So she's the expert, not you.
That's
or
just
us.
a great comment.
I got one more thing. Depending on the danger of the situation, though, you might have to have the authorities involved too. There was an incident at my church where a woman came into the church to seek refuge in the church. 10 minutes later, the abuser came storming into the service. So I had to kind of jump in, and I had to look at my leadership and say, you got to call the cops. So I had to put myself out there so he didn't come at her. But you realize that superheroes. Realize that you're not bulletproof. Realize a couple things.
Absolutely.
So have the authorities ready to come if it's needed.
Yeah,
In some
absolutely.
cases,
Thank
it
you
is
so
needed,
much.
so.
Yeah.
We actually had to do that at our pantry at one point, and then that's when the Latino males came circling around. Here's some other things besides the ones that we talked about. Question her. Believe that it's that we shouldn't do. We shouldn't question her. Let her know that think of her children. She would have to leave. We shouldn't, if I know. Yeah. So listen, if it was me, I wouldn't stay. If he hit me once, I'd leave. You shouldn't call the police on them as they're there. If the situation is actually happening in front of you, right there, then you do. But if she's there safe and everything, she's there, don't call the police when she starts telling you that. But still believe her. Don't say you should kick him out, because as Pastor talked about, they are lacking in resources. Why don't you leave? We talked about a little bit of that. And then we have a graphic.
This is actually, I really liked this when I saw it because of the bricks of the cinder blocks by the door that she cannot leave. But, so you can see some of the things up here, but what would first come to your mind about why she doesn't leave? Because of course our gut reaction is to think and to say, she has to leave, you have to leave, but what are some reasons she might not?
Lack of finance.
Finances, absolutely, yeah.
And no place to go.
No place to go.
Also the children. Children are involved.
The children, and some people say, and this is a disagreement people have with me sometimes, including people who work in domestic violence, because a lot of people will say the children, well, the ones that work in it don't say the children will leave their father, he should stay. But a lot of people will say he's abusive, but he can still be a good father. I don't think that's true at all. Okay. So anyway, those are some. Those are some reasons of why she might not leave, and there are so many. I mean, as many women as there are being abused, and men, and anybody, there are reasons. So as a church, what can we do? And we can tell you some of the things we do at Bridge of Peace, but what are some things we can do as a church?
Talk about it, normalize it.
Normalize it, talk about it. Prayer, sermons, teaching moments, Bible study, children and youth programming, have information out, which we do. Maybe have signs or information in your bathroom so people can look at them in private. And be aware of what's happening around us, like when the couple ended up at our pantry. We might not get to our story. Do you want to do this one?
Yes. I was having a conversation with a co-worker of mine, and we were talking about domestic violence, and she said that the priest, the Catholic priest, decided to take it upon himself to, in a domestic violence month like it is now, to go in the pulpit and talk to the guys and say, you should not be doing this. It is wrong for the men to do this in the families, and you know, and it was just like belittling the people. So these are things that people should not do us to someone else, but it is even worse when it comes from the pulpit. Sometimes when we talk in a harsh way toward men like that, what would happen is that they would shrink a little bit more, they would go further back, and then they would hide it as much as they can, even more than what they were doing. So it would be a lot less apparent that they're doing it. So we should mind our words, especially people that have control and authority.
We have one more really good story, but we're not going to have time to do it. But this happened earlier in ministry at a yard sale, and many of us were able to use our gifts as social workers, as pastor, as someone with a lot of experience working with people, and Deacon Ann, whose funeral we'll be having later today, taking
You're
people,
not telling the story because I'll start crying.
taking people inside to pray. Pastor Andy is going to give you some handouts to take with you. These have a lot of information, sites where you can get publications and more information, as well as information about the Volunteers of America program to end family violence, which actually works with abuse. I can't think of the other word they use, so I'm going to say abusers. They don't say perpetrators, they say offenders. So please take these, read them. The VOA program there is in Camden, Burlington, and Mercer counties. However, if you call that number, they can probably tell you what's in the other counties. And Pastor Giselle is going to run through the rest of our PowerPoint.
So Laura came up with a really cool idea to involve the congregation in just being advocates. And so every October, we simply do this. We do buttons. They have a button business. And so she makes buttons. And so there's buttons. Jose has a button on that says, you know, God's work our hands, you know, stop domestic violence.
And there's buttons at the table when you come in.
And there are buttons at the table when you come in. And then we do this. Here's Jose.
And what does it say?
It says, no hay excusa para violencia doméstica. There is no excuse for domestic violence. No more. But he goes to my church. He said he was sorry, maybe until next time. My wife is a survivor. No one deserves to be hit. Another man against violence against women. There's the song, there's the button. Jose's wearing it. Nadie merece ser golpeado. No one deserves to be hit. God's work our hands. Lutherans against domestic violence. Why doesn't she tell someone? I will listen. I will believe her. No, she didn't ask for it. Jealousy doesn't mean he loves you. Flowers won't make it better. And then we do all sorts of events throughout the month where we talk about it, we encourage people, we provide training. We worked with Moms Demand Action, and this was a gun violence, I guess their meeting, their monthly meeting. And we had one of our members who actually lives in Oklahoma. Yes, she is a partial member of the Bridge. Isn't that cool? She worships with us online. And she was abused years and years and years and years ago. And she was triggered by this event. And she finally was able to sort of let go of all of that pain. Isn't that cool? You come to an event and you got to have that come. That's what it means to just be present to people. We can do it. We can be a difference. We really can, folks. So I just, I'm thankful that we have an opportunity to share this. And we are the church together, so let's do it. Thank you. Thank you, Jose and Laura.
Thank you so much to our friends from Bridge of Peace. We are so blessed by our relationship with you guys. Every time we visit and you visit us, we learn and we grow, and we're so happy to be church together. So thank you so much.
Happy to be here.
And we have about 9 minutes until the top of the hour. So I encourage you to get up, stretch, get some coffee, talk to each other, and we'll reconvene here at 11. So thank you.